Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. This is Friday night, November the 11th, and 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. This is Child Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room's open. I did pop the link into there. We're still looking at the Help Guide article that we were looking at really all week and last week a little bit too, I think. Help Guide, they've got some great information just on everything really to do with mental health or just health issues and family issues, just about anything, eating disorders, you name it, you can find it on Help Guide. That's http://helpguide.org, and they've got some really good information under their abuse topics. And I've used this information a lot just in my own studies, my own personal studies, and just learning more and more all the time, about the whole issue surrounding child abuse and stuff. I grew up abused. It's not like I don't know about abuse. I'm really should be an expert on abuse, but I'm just always looking for more information. And so I found this website a long time ago and really noticed that there's a lot of information on there, even for adult survivors of child abuse, and information for people, who've survived sexual assault and different things like that. So it's a great resource. And they have links, just tons of links and tons of info there. So I hope everybody will go check that out. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I've done so many shows and so many people still tuning in. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I just have no idea who you all are really who are listening to my shows, but I know of some of my friends are kind of here every day, and I really appreciate that very much because it's a half an hour out of your day. Or even an hour if you're here for both my shows, usually throughout the week. And I appreciate it very much, spending that time with me. And, I'm just a private citizen paying to do my shows here on Blog Talk Radio. I just want to be one more voice really speaking out against abuse, standing up for child rights, and really making some noise just on my own capacity in whatever way I could, And so that's why I'm doing this. And I'm preparing really to go speak publicly, hopefully in the future at different conferences, at different events especially around North America, United States and Canada, if I can, because that's my goal, is to speak publicly about child abuse and make as much noise as possible, just to be one more person doing it. And there's a need, a serious need. There's also a serious need for these conventions to take place, and right now it's kind of like every other year, so you see a big convention somewhere every couple of years. Really, they should be in every city, every town, every place should have a child abuse council that just does nothing but promote public awareness about child abuse. But unfortunately, it just doesn't happen, and the money is just not put into it. Because money, children's lives don't really matter. And that's obvious, because otherwise we'd be doing something to try to change this mess, right? There's billions of dollars being pumped in annually into the system, not to stop child abuse, but just because of child abuse. And so the whole thing is just kind of like, I don't know, it's ridiculous. There's a lot of people are saying it's just a money-making issue, but, for me, I just think that people just, the government, and it's not like I'm running the government down, because I'm all pro-government. I'm also pro-law. But the thing is it just seems like, children are not the priority. It's pretty obvious, except for somebody like myself who's as uneducated as I am. Children are not the priority. They're not the priority in people's lives. They're not the priority in this world. They're not the priority, period. And they really should be. Adults have to be priority, but they also need to prioritize children just as well as they do themselves, because children are the future, and they really are. They deserve every opportunity, to have a decent, good life. And what's really sad is that there's a group, and there always has been, this issue of adults on the planet who either abuse these children, kill these children, sexually use these children, exploit children worldwide. And, then there's another handful and portion of society throughout history that really just doesn't care. And then there's a sort of a smaller percentage of people that really do care, but can't really seem to make the changes because it's too big. The issues are too big, right? And so when you look around and you see what's going on worldwide, it's absolutely insane. But when you actually even take a looking around at, even if you just take the United States or just take Canada, the issues are too too huge, you know what I mean? Because too many people are abusing children. But that's why, I do what I do. That's why I sit here night after night, day after day, doing what I'm doing, because I figure, hey, I only got so many years left. And, what am I going to do with my time that really means as much as trying to promote awareness and education regarding child abuse, right? There isn't anything I could do that's more valuable, right? Because and I don't have children. You know what I mean? It's I'm not a parent, you know what I mean? The issue is I was abused as a child. And it's really why I don't have children. Right? I can't have children because I was sexually used as a child. It's really quite unfortunate that so many of us out here are in the same boat. And, that's why I do what I do. Because children should not be abused in any way. And I don't mind saying it. I don't mind standing up and saying, stop child abuse. But it's not the popular thing to do, and that's why a lot of people don't want to get involved, because it's an issue that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to hear about it, don't even want to have to deal with it, and especially not on their lunch breaks. And, in the meantime, kids are dying, right? They're dying needlessly. These are not childhood diseases brought on by genetics or, some type of disease that a child ends up with. That's sad and heartbreaking, you know what I mean? But these are people maiming and torturing and on purpose hurting children, whether it's their own or someone else's, and that's preventable. And people say, is it really? Well, of course it is. Abuse is a choice. People choose to abuse. My parents chose to do what they did to me, and they were perfectly justified. They were brought up on charges, too. But did it stop them? No. Oh, no. They were just going to continue right on into that, because that's the way they felt about their children, And that's what so many people will do, kill their children for taking a muffin off the stove. There was an article not too long ago about that. Torture and beat their children to death for, taking $5 out of someone's wallet. It's absolutely ridiculous that people think that that's okay. There's a whole world full of people sexually using children and sexually exploiting children and thinking it's fine. Well, this is really sick and twisted. And, this is what society really needs to wake up and smell the coffee, that these people live right next door to us, These people that are involved in child sexual, the porn rings and different things like that, and child sex, the slave trade and whatnot, these people live right next door to us. You bet they do. And they don't look like some sort of scary monsters, running down the street wearing, black trench coats with funny-looking hats and masks on. These people, live right next to us. They work right next to us, and they shop at the same stores that we do. And these are the people that are either out here abusing their own children or abusing someone else's child. And this just makes me sick to my stomach, right? Because the rest of the world just looks on and says, oh, well, not my problem. Why should we care about it? It's not our problem. It's not my child. And it's sad. That's, I guess, what angers me about that is just the fact that because I was abused as a child and I didn't get any help and there were people that could have done something, it's the same thing today. It's the same thing that society saying, what, not my problem, and that's so unfortunate because really it is everyone's problem. And it should be, you know what I mean? Because obviously the people who are supposed to be looking out for these children are not doing their job. And so that's why I don't really go around, pointing fingers at, the CPS and all these different things. Because if people would stop abusing their children, we wouldn't even need CPS. We wouldn't need DHS. We wouldn't need Child Protective Services. If people would stop abusing children, period, of any type of abuse, I don't care what it is, if they would just stop it, well, we wouldn't have the need for that, would we? Right? So who's to blame? The abusers are to blame, right? But so many people like to blame the system, and it's really unfortunate. But there are some really sick and twisted people out there. Absolutely. I mean, my parents were two of them. And so I know, you know what I mean? I know how many sick and twisted people there are out there. And it's really sad because children are the ones who pay the price for them. And that's really, really sad, and it's pathetic, and it's got to stop. And I seriously think education really is the key. Education within the school systems, because obviously the people that are raising these children here today aren't doing a good job, because we have 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 18-year-olds, just coming out of, college or just some of them coming out of high school, who in the next year or two will kill their children. They will they'll kill them somehow, or they will sexually use them, or they will abuse them, and they will lose them to the court system. They'll lose them, right? So obviously we're not doing a good job. at, promoting the cessation of child abuse, right? And I think about this all the time because I'm thinking each time, a generation of high school students graduates, I'm like, well, how many of these, I still call them kids, they're not really kids, but how many of these young people are we going to see in the paper in the next 2 or 3 years up on murder charges for killing, their own child or someone else's child, right? And quite a few. If we could track them, it'd be really, really quite interesting. Well, we can because we know who these people are that get brought up on and convicted, if they're found guilty of killing their own child or someone else's child. And there's information's in the on the news and in the papers and whatnot. And it would be really interesting to sort of just start taking notice of who these people are, what school system they came through, and start to realize that these people, these people that just graduated this last year from high school in the next couple of years are going to have children, and how many of them will kill and rape and maim and torture their little toddlers, their little infants, their little babies, and older children, right? And then there's older parents abusing their children too, you know what I mean? But it's just the fact that this is really pathetic. The cycle still continues on, and it's like, well, when is it going to change? Well, there's only so many of us that can actually donate so much time. I got to work full time. I got to pay my bills. And it's like, I wish I didn't have to work full time because I would, be able to devote my whole time to doing what I want to do, which is get out here and make a lot of noise. But, I got to work, right? And so it's unfortunate because so many people that would like to be involved, can't because they're in the same boat that I'm in. They just really only have so many hours per day to do this. It's unfortunate, you know what I mean? It's just the way that it is, right? But, we just do what we can, right? And that's why I'm a big promoter of just saying, well, as long as we're just doing what we can and, just do the best we can with what we have to offer, whether it's just volunteering locally or getting involved, with some sort of national campaign, to stop child abuse, right? It's doing our little part actually really does add up. It all does make a big difference, right? People might say, well, what could my contribution really do? Well, it really does help because every little bit helps, right? In the big grand scheme of things, if everybody's doing something little, well, it all adds up to something big. And so that's why I just try to do my little part, whatever I can do, right? But I just know what these kids are going through out here tonight, and I go to bed and I remember what I went through as a child, and I close my eyes and I don't just drift off and not think about these kids out here, tonight. It doesn't matter what age they are. I knew so many kids growing up who were treated, horrifically as children, and we all hung out together and, birds of a feather flock together, right? It's, I knew so many kids who were abused, and I think about these little kids out here tonight who are in the same or worse situations that I grew up in, and I sit there and I think about them, and I'm like, oh my God, there's no way we're going to be able to save them. There's no way anybody's going to be able to save them unless somebody makes a phone call to the police, report it as a crime. Child abuse is a crime, and it seriously needs to be reported as a crime. And if there's no abuse, chance, they aren't going to remove the child. A lot of people think, well, what if I break up a happy home? Well, a child who's being abused is not happy, and that's not a happy home, And people think, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I make the phone call and I'm wrong? Well, if you're wrong, it's better to be wrong than not make the call, and a child dies because of it. And so many children are left, in the homes because the reports are made and nothing's done about it. There's no follow-up. There's not these people that are manning the telephones have to make a decision, and after 20, 30 calls on the same child, you'd think they'd do something about it, but they don't. Because they make mistakes, right? And who pays the price? That kid does. Those kids do. Those children, right? That drives me absolutely up the wall. Because we're out here saying, promoting, if you know a child's being abused, do the right thing, make the phone call. And even if you make the phone call, there's still the chance that the child is not going to be saved. There's not going to be any help for that child. My parents were arrested and busted and brought up on child abuse charges and had to go before the courts and had to promise and swear and sign pieces of paper that they would do this and they would do that in order to keep us in the home. This was back in the 60s when everything was rather new, so they didn't really have I'm sure today we would have been removed from the home, but back then, it was kind of like, well, a little more slack, right? So my parents didn't fulfill what they were supposed to do, and we were allowed to stay in the home. You know what I mean? And so even when there is reports made, it doesn't mean that the child's going to get any help. But what it does, it's worth a chance. It's worth a shot. I say that every child's life is worth a chance. It's worth that chance to me. You know what I mean? If you ask me, that's how I feel about it. But it's just important to know that, child abuse, it's not stopping. It's not like it's just slowing down and people aren't abusing children. I mean, it's still very present in our society. And just because people aren't talking about it doesn't mean it's not happening. And if you don't look at the headlines and you don't see the reports that are coming out, you might see one child abuse headline in your own local paper once in a while and think, oh, isn't that tragic? But when you still look at what's going on nationally, internationally, around the world, even just North America wide, it's really disturbing, just how many children are being abused. Risk factors for child abuse and neglect. This is on helpguide.org, www.helpguide.org, and they talk about the risk factors for child abuse and neglect. And they said that while child abuse and neglect occurs in all types of families, even in those that look happy from the outside, children are at a much greater risk in certain situations. For instance, if there's domestic violence involved, if there's domestic violence and abuse in the home, right? Alcohol and drug abuse, children living, in environments where there's alcoholism or drug abuse or illegal activity going on, that's a very, very dangerous situation for them. Untreated mental illness, my parents were, were totally violent and abusive towards each other. So I grew up in a domestic violence situation and abuse, and with my parents having untreated mental illness. And they were also just, they have lack of parenting skills, and this is another issue, stress and lack of support. These are things that can set a child up for abuse or children up for abuse. If the parents are not coping well, if there's drug abuse or alcohol abuse, if there's domestic violence within the home, the children can suffer in that. And just even being a witness to the violence, they may not even the violence may not even be directed to them, which in our case it was, but even in a situation where the parents love the children but fight amongst each other, the children will definitely be affected by that. A lot of people think it doesn't affect the children, but it really does, because the children know. Children are very, very smart. They know what's going on. They have eyes, they have ears, and they're very intuitive. They're paying attention to their environment, right? And so if they bring a child up in an environment where, there's a lot of tension and a lot of anger and a lot of violence between the parents, it will definitely have an effect on the child. And then if the child grows up in a violent neighborhood, it doesn't help either, because then all they know is violence. That's what I do. I just do violence. I do violence from the time I was a little kid all the way through, right? So a violent life was mine. And kind of scary, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, not good at all, right? You don't want a child to be brought up in that. And so many kids are, and they see these kids out here on the streets, and many of them will join gangs and whatnot. And then people think, well, look at those gangs, look at those punks, and some of them are not being abused, obviously. They just like the idea of joining the gangs. But there are some that are using the gang as a type of family, type of support. Many times they will, They're looking for somebody to support them, right? So a lot of young people get involved in gang activities or violent crime and stuff like that, hanging around with other kids on the street and get in trouble. And, you have to think about what their childhood was like, because I know all about that. And it's incredibly harsh, children have to deal with and go through just because two parents or one parent or whoever the caregivers are can't pull it together and cope properly and, be the responsible adult that they should be. And do the right job parenting, right? Parenting, I know, is not an easy job. I can imagine it's the hardest job in the world, as far as I'm concerned, because I know that there's every type of thing will come up in a parent's, in a parent's daily walk, trying to be a good parent. I can imagine how hard it is, you know what I mean? But I also know that there's a responsibility to those children and to that child that parents really owe that child. It's something that's just required, and child rights, just spell it right out: the right to life, the right to an abuse-free life, the right to education, the right to health care, the right to having their needs met, like children have the right to have their needs met, right? Which is every need that they possibly need, which would be the physical needs, their emotional needs, their psychological needs, their health needs, medical needs, their educational needs, governmental needs, their social needs. Like these needs are all part of the child's rights. Children have rights, and they have the right to get their needs met. And what is so pathetic and so sad is that there's so many people out here having children who have no intentions on meeting their children's needs. It's all about them, and what about their needs? That was my mother's favorite thing to say. What about my needs? What about my needs? Like my mother hated her children, right? She kind of, I don't know, she liked her boys more than her girls for sure. But the thing is that she didn't want children, and she hated the fact that these children needed her because she was wounded herself. She was abused, and she was always, what about my needs? What about my needs? Because she was being abused by my dad too, so she was just a victim all the way around. You know what I mean? She was also a perpetrator, and she was my main abuser. And I saw this whole thing from a very sick and twisted viewpoint, but I understand it. You know what I mean? And it's very sad that parents, caregivers and whatnot will put their own needs before their child's needs as far as that kind of stuff goes. I mean, they do need to put their needs in there too, because parents need to have a life too, right? But you pop a kid out, or you have a child under your care, then you do the right thing by that child, right? And my parents, the courts told my parents, they said, man, you too, they were going to remove us from the home. My mom was like, don't take my children, trying to be the good mother, right? And it was all their father, and all this stuff, right? Which wasn't true because, my older siblings spoke up and told them that it wasn't, and my mother was involved in it as well. And the courts were like, well, the two of you, you need serious help, and you need to get that help, and if you don't meet the needs, your children will be removed. So the social workers were coming around for quite a while. And I remember they used to come by, and they used to come by with their clipboards. There used to be two of them, a man and a woman, and they used to check us all out and everything, and check for, they used to be looking for abuse, make me take off my clothes and everything, and they would talk to me and stuff, but I was really little. My older siblings were quite a bit older than me. And but I remember, and the issue is my mother, she wanted to be a good mother, but she didn't know how. She didn't have the skills. Like the lack of parenting skills. She didn't have the skills needed to be a good mother. My dad didn't have the skills needed to be even a good husband or a good father. Right? Both of my parents were abused as children. They both grew up mentally ill and with all kinds of problems. Right? And so, yeah, absolutely horrific. The two of them, and it's unfortunate because we paid the price for that. The only reason why I'm here today is because I haven't killed myself. Right? It's amazing. I'm really glad that I didn't kill myself, and two of my brothers killed themselves, and one of my sisters was going to kill herself, and my family's suicidal because my parents were suicidal, and that's why I hope to be able to get involved with crisis management and suicide prevention support and whatnot in the next couple of years. But I'm doing a lot of training right now. I'm actually quite busy with studies and stuff. But the thing is so many people who have been abused will go on and kill themselves, And so if the parents don't kill them, or the caregivers, whoever abused that child, whoever was the abuser, it doesn't have to be a family member, there's somebody else outside the family as well, gets a hold of a child and abuses that child, quite often that child will eventually destroy themselves because of the abuse. So the abuse, while the child's being abused, is destroying the child. And then the child gets to just go ahead and live this life that self-destructs around them because they don't know how to cope, and they don't know how to get help, and they don't even understand that they should get help. Many times, I know I didn't until the age of 41. So, this is the thing. It's so incredibly tragic. So it is everyone's business. It is everyone's responsibility. If the parents aren't doing the right thing and the caregivers are not doing the right thing by the children, then somebody else needs to step in, whoever that is. And it means the society as a whole needs to step in, because people say, well, it's just those parents' responsibility. They should be doing the right thing by their child, so I'm not getting involved. I've heard this before. And the issue is okay, well, that's fine. That's dandy. It is the parents' responsibility. But guess what? If they're not doing the job and they're beating that child, they're raping that child, they're sexually abusing that child, they're exploiting that child, they're verbally, psychologically damaging that child, then it is everyone's responsibility to step in. Because why should that child pay the price why should that child or those children be made to pay the price just because they got a bad hand? They got dealt a bad hand. Yeah, they got popped out by a bunch of crazy people. Like, that's unfortunate. You know what I mean? And people say, well, that's just too bad for that kid. Well, why does it have to be that way? Why does society have to be that way? Why does society have to say too bad for that kid? That just makes me angry because I was one of those kids. You know what I mean? And I think that, because I've come a long way in my journey, obviously, that I counted. I did matter as a child. I did not deserve the abuse that I had to go through. And I don't think any child does. So where in society, is this coming from, this whole idea of, not my problem, why should we care? Well, somebody should have bloody cared. And it should have been my parents. But since they couldn't do it, then it should have been somebody else. There were people that knew, they could have intervened, but they didn't care because they didn't care about kids either, right? So this is the issue, because people need to change the way they feel about children. And people need to change, need to become educated, especially serious education regarding child's rights. Child rights are so important that we have to uphold them. Children have the right to life, right? So every time a child is murdered and killed, by, abuse, whether they just die from the injuries or whether they're just flat out murdered, cold blood murder, every time a child is murdered, their right to life is being taken away. That's the very number one basic human right. You know what I mean? We all have the right to life, right? And the sad fact is the people that kill their children, they generally get out after a couple of years, and then they pop out more kids, and they kill those kids too, or they abuse them in some way or lose them to the system or whatever. People say, well, they have a right to pop out kids. Well, why? No, they don't have the right to abuse children. So, you know what? Don't allow it. Don't allow people to abuse children in your own life. If you see somebody abusing a child, you get that child some help. First and mainly, call 911. Report it as a crime. Child abuse is a crime. It needs to be reported as such. And let the authorities let the police make the decision whether it needs to be, who needs to be phoned. You know what I mean? I just saw an article about that tonight. And that's just so true. Right? Lots of people talking about that, actually. It needs to be reported as a crime, because it is a crime. It's against the law, There's people out here who rape, they're going to rape and sexually use children tonight. There's people out here that will do this. And it's a crime. I hope everybody knows this, and I hope they bust every single one of them. You know what I mean? Yep, every single one of them. That's my prayer. I'd like to see every single one of those people fry, to be honest with you. Yeah, because they know it's wrong and they do it anyway. And there's a whole group of people say, oh, well, they don't think it's wrong. No, somewhere deep inside them, they know it's wrong, but they do it anyway, and they justify it by saying, well, I didn't know it was wrong. Right, okay, yeah, we believe that. No, it's just there's so many really mentally ill, sick people out there who are using children sexually, and they need to stop. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we all have to do something about this. You know what I mean? And what I seriously think people should do, even for myself, like kind of what I'm doing, is get involved locally, find chapters that are doing some great work locally as well as nationally. Like kind of get involved wherever you can, and just be a part of it. You know what I mean? Just get out there and be a part of it, and because we need this change, and we need education in schools, and we need young people to realize that they have to stop the cycle. You know what I mean? And it's got to be this generation. I keep talking about this. You can go back from my last 850 shows, and it has to be this generation that does it. And the reason why is because it's going to take another 20 years for this generation to change it. And in the meantime, we're going to lose, 7,000 children, 8,000 children a year times 20. That's 160,000 children will die from abuse. And that's low. Those numbers are low, We really need to do something about this. This is a crisis. It's an epidemic, and we need to stop it, right? Have a great night, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take good care of yourselves. Don't forget about these kids out here who are being abused right now. We're going to see their stuff in the paper tomorrow in the next couple of days, right? Children being beaten and killed and murdered and sexually used. Horrific. Don't forget about them. Keep them in your heart. Keep them in your prayers. Have a great night, everybody. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.